Hey guys, I'm Hendo, and today I'm showing you how to cosplay Fat Gum from My Hero Academia. First, I'm going to go over who Fat Gum is and why he's awesome. Then I'll show you in detail how I made the costume. And then finally, I'm going to show you some easy poses to keep in mind when you're cosplaying him. You can find a timestamp for all the sections down in the caption, along with my free patterns. So let's get started. Fat Gum is currently ranked 58th among all the pro heroes, and he is a big boy. He's 8'2", and his quirk is fat absorption, so he can absorb the force of all attacks to his body like a big, cuddly human shield. In episode 72, we get to see the full extent of his powers, and plot twist, he can also unleash a crazy, powerful counterattack that's the sum of all that impact energy. And in this case, using his quirk also consumes a bunch of energy from his fat stores, and he sheds all that weight and becomes dead sexy. But he's also very cute and cuddly in his big boy form. But aside from all that power and dead sexiness, I think that Fat Gum is just kind of a wonderful human being and mentor. In that same episode, even though Fat Gum deals the final blow, he really kind of focuses on how amazing Kirishima was in that fight. As he's about to unleash this attack, he basically has a mini monologue where he says, "You and I both underestimated Red Right." And he's like, Did you see my boy? He gave us an opportunity and he's the reason that we're gonna win this fight. Even though he dealt the final blow, he gave credit where credit was due, and that's so important to Kirishima's development and learning to believe and trust in himself a little bit more. Like, I feel like Fat Gum's like, did you see my pointy boy? He's freaking incredible. Don't talk to me or my son ever again though, but like, look at him, he's wonderful. I think after that episode, we all collectively decided that Fat Gum is amazing. He definitely deserves some love. And now that we're plus super badass ultra hyped, let's make his costume. I got this cheap crop hoodie on Amazon, and I'm taping off where I want the letters to go so it's somewhat even and symmetrical. If I wanted to be extra clean and try hard, I would bust out my ruler, but meh. I have a pattern for the letters down in the caption, but this is how I made them. I'm using blue painter's tape to make the two F's and the G. Tape is really nice because it has a set even width, so you're gonna get really nice, straight, even letters without all that extra measuring. The letters on Fat Gum's jacket are tan, outlined with orange. I'm using this thinner masking tape to make a decision about the letter sizing. I'm either gonna make the letters the size of the tan masking tape or the blue painter's tape. The masking tape is a little bit too thin, so I'm gonna go with the size of the blue painter's tape. And now I'm just peeling off the tape letters and transferring it to felt. Felt is a nice cheap option, and it's really easy to work with. It's a little bit stiffer, but since this is a jacket and not really form-fitted to me, I don't mind that. Once my letters are cut out, I'm gonna go ahead and lay it on the orange felt and then sew it down. I'm not gonna trim the orange just yet. Now that the letters are sewn down, I'm gonna go ahead and cut the orange, leaving about 1/4 of an inch around every edge. I think this is much easier than cutting out two versions of the letters and trying to lay them on top, because they kind of always slide around and this is just way simpler. I'm just gonna eyeball it, but you can be more precise if you use a ruler and a washable marker. This might actually be a little bit thinner than 1/4 of an inch, but I'm just going with whatever looks right to my eye. Do whatever looks good to you. Next, I'm lining up where my letters should go and pinning them down. Be extra careful when you sew not to sew the back. Now that my letters are sewn down, I'm gonna go ahead and add a zipper. Again, tape is my best friend as a guide for nice straight lines. Luckily, this jacket fabric is stretchy and doesn't really fray, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pin the zipper down directly. But if you do have a fabric that frays, you'll just want to tuck that edge under. Now that that's sewn down, I'm just cutting off the excess from the letters and getting rid of any stray threads. And now bam, the jacket's done. Next, I'm gonna make the gloves. I have this nice bright orange stretch fabric. Stretch is gonna be the easiest because you don't have to worry about finishing any of the edges. Stretch fabric doesn't tend to fray at all, and you shouldn't need more than 1/2 yard. The first thing I've done is folded my fabric in half, and now I'm just gonna trace my hand. I already have a glove pattern for my hand, but if you don't have one, all you have to do is trace your hand and leave a little bit of extra room for seam allowance. I'm using a blue washable fabric marker in order to trace my pattern. This is different from like a non-toxic washable marker. This one is specifically for fabric, and when you wash it out, the blue will completely disappear. I'll put a link to that in the description below because it's very handy to have. I'll put my glove pattern down in the caption also. For reference, I'm 5 feet tall and I have slightly long fingers for my height. I think the gloves are easier to sew if you pin on the inside of the hand the way that I have here. And now I'm just gonna roughly cut around the glove, but not really cut it out. This is just so that it's a little bit easier to sew and hold. I'm not gonna show me sewing the glove because it's pretty straightforward and kind of boring, but basically I'm just sewing directly on the marker line. After you sew the first one, go ahead and try it on before you cut it out. If the glove is a little bit too small, on the next one just draw slightly outside of your marker, and you can just redo the first one. Since I'm using a stretchy fabric, it's pretty forgiving and it tends to fit pretty well. Now that my gloves are sewn and I know that they fit, I'm gonna go ahead and cut them out, being sure not to get too close to the thread. And since I would really like to be able to use my phone, I'm gonna go ahead and cut off some of the fingertips. I really like the look of having your middle, index, and thumb finger free. And I usually cut right above the first knuckle. And after cutting the fingertips, I'm gonna go back and add a little bit more stitching right at the edge so that it doesn't unravel. Finally, it's time for that knuckle armor. Since the design is pretty simple and small and I want full motion in my hands, I'm just gonna go ahead and paint that part on. I highly recommend this golden brand of silver paint. It goes on basically like silver leaf and it's really opaque. I never really have to use more than 2 layers for anything. It's a bit pricier. This little tube is between like $7 and $10, but it's so worth how few coats you have to do. Now, yay! Gloves are done! Fat Gum shoes are bright yellow and orange. I actually think they're a little bit ugly. Since I pretty much never get my shoes photographed, I'm not gonna put too many effort points into this part. I'm just gonna tape off the shoe and spray paint it. I recommend combining both tape and a trash bag so that you don't waste too much tape. And I didn't film me spray painting it, but just trust that I spray painted it. And now I get to do all that satisfying tape peeling. These look kind of ridiculous and clowny, but that's how they are, so there you go. Shoes are done. Probably the most complicated part of Fat Gum's costume is the armor, and it's really not that bad. Again, I have a pattern down in the caption, but this is how I made it. This is just the good old plastic wrap and tape method. The nice thing is that his knee armor doesn't wrap around all the way, so I can just focus on the front half. I'm drawing the circles just to have a good idea of the shape. Since the armor is curved, I'm gonna go ahead and make these 2 slits on the sides so that the pattern lays out flat. I'm using 1/4" EVA foam for the armor, but you could also just use craft foam. And just a little bit of contact cement to assemble them. The easiest way to get nice, even, circular bolt things is just use a foam dowel. And there are suggestions for where to get one down in the caption below. You could also use something like water bottle caps or just cut out circles, but I think that this is much easier, and because it's also foam, it's gonna adhere and flex much better. And it's worth how uniform and even they are. I'm cutting out all of them to be 1/2 inch long and just gluing it onto the armor. I think for the orange pads, the circles are actually flat on top, but I liked this look better and was kind of pressed on time. My strapping system for this armor is gonna be Velcro, elastic, and D-rings. I'm gonna attach these D-rings kind of like sewing, but instead I'm gonna use really thin wire and a whip stitch. A whip stitch is basically where you always go in through one side and out through a different side, basically making a loop around the top. You don't want to make the stitches too close together because it might rip through the holes. And to finish it off, you can just wrap the wire around the D-ring a few times and cut off the excess. Kirby was really interested in the wire, but a cat is definitely not essential or really at all helpful to this process. But she's cute! So I'm not going to show the sealing process because I've honestly done it to death, but I'm just using spray on Plasti Dip and then hammered silver metal paint. Boom! Easy! And now I'm just going to add a little bit of detail with acrylic paint. I'm shading all the edges with black, and I'm adding a little bit of white acrylic to some of the edges, mostly from the top. And the silver knee pads also have orange on the inside of those bolts. Finally, it's time to make some straps. I'm cutting all of the elastic long enough to go through one side and loop back around to the other. Since it's stretchy, the measurement doesn't have to be too exact, but for reference, I cut all of mine out to be about 8.5 inches. I'm using a lighter to burn the edges so that they don't fray, but that's not always a huge issue anyway. Next, I'm going to sew one strap to the outer ring for all 4 armor pieces. For the orange pieces, that doesn't really matter, they're symmetrical. For the silver ones, the slightly longer, pointier part goes up. Next, I'm measuring and pinning the Velcro. The rougher hook side is going to go on the outside of the strap, closest to the D-ring where the strap is already attached. The soft loop side is going to go also on the outside of the strap, but all the way on the free end. And once that's sewn down, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess threads. And here they are, all finished. Since I'm doing the version of Fat Gum kind of after his fight where he's a little bit more disheveled, I'm gonna go ahead and tatter a black shirt. Probably the pants, armor, and jacket should also be a bit disheveled, but I'm just gonna do it to the shirt instead. I have a basic black t-shirt that I got from Amazon, and I'm just gonna hack at it with some fabric scissors. The best way to get random jagged cuts is to gather the fabric together when you cut it. I like to have these random pointy dangly bits with no real pattern to it. You can also twist and gather parts of your shirt to a point and cut off that point in order to get these nice little jagged holes too. I'm also going to cut up the ends of the sleeves and part of the collar. I have the safe for work version, and since the pack came with 2 shirts, I'm also going to make one where you can see a little bit of the cleavage through some of the holes. I want to be a little bit sexy, don't sue me! And that's it for the shirt. Fat Gum has a really unflattering mask. It covers almost all of his forehead. And I don't think that looks as good in real life, so I'm gonna go ahead and make something a little bit more flattering. I'd rather it be cute than 100% accurate. Now that I have a basic pattern, I'm gonna go ahead and try it on and make sure it looks good. I'm gonna make my mask out of Worbla. Masks are actually my #1 use for Worbla. It's worth the cost for how well it fits my face and for how easy it is to use. Worbla is usually shipped in a roll, so it has a slight curve to it, so the first thing I'm gonna do is heat it up so that it lays flat. Black Worbla doesn't take too much heat to soften, so make sure you don't go overboard. You just want it to get to be a little bit warm to the touch. And now I'm transferring my pattern onto my Worbla, and I'm gonna cut it out while it's completely cool. One more check on that shape and fit. You'll notice that the nose looks a bit wider right now, but that's because after I heat and shape it, it'll look much thinner. Now it's time to heat it up to make it pliable for shaping. If it's too hot, let it cool a little bit so it's just warm to the touch. It doesn't need to be that hot. Once it's ready, I'm gonna put it on while looking up and slowly form it to my face. This is why you don't want it to be too hot. Once it's cooled down a little bit, I can go ahead and look forward and make sure it looks even. This takes a little bit of practice, but the nice thing about Worbla is you can usually heat it up and reshape it if needed. You can always ask a friend or parent for help too. If you don't have black Worbla, you can always use craft foam or leather, but you're gonna have to glue it or tape it in more places and be a little bit more careful when you take it off. This Worbla mask looks just right to me. To stick the mask on, I usually use spirit gum, Pros-Aid, or fabric tape. I just stick it in the center and on the two sides so that the rest of my face mostly has freedom to move. You can see that even though it sticks to me, I can still move my eyebrows and my cheeks, and I don't feel as limited with my facial expressions. And that's it for the mask. This costume is ready to go, so now the last thing to figure out is how to portray this hero. There are a lot of ways to do this, and you should go with whatever works for you and whatever you feel comfortable with. There's no right way to cosplay. But if you're anything like me, you might make this amazing, magnificent costume and then get to the con and not really be prepared on how to pose. It's always good to think about that ahead of time, and I have 5 easy poses to keep in mind for portraying Fat Gum. First is what I call the hood hold. Make sure that you aren't blocking your face with your hands. And try to spread out your fingers a little bit so that they don't look so blocky. And I usually prefer to stagger my hands, just to make it a little bit more dynamic. You can do this pose with the hood up or putting the hood up. The next pose is the jacket shrug. This is kind of similar to the last one, except you're just gonna hold the edges of your jacket. You can also hold the jacket out to show a bit more of your waist. And if you prefer to wear the jacket zipped up the way that Fat Gum usually has it in the anime, you can just hold the top portion of the jacket, kind of like Superman. The next pose I call the headrest. This is a good one for looking extra confident. And if you're a lady, it's also a good way to show your waist if you're wearing a crop top. All you have to do is put your arms up over your head. I prefer to still be able to see your hands, especially since you went through all the trouble of making those gloves. Even just one hand up looks pretty cool. Next is the glove pull. I think this is a good simple pose for portraits. And you can do this anytime you wear any gloves. Just pull down the end of one glove and give a little bit of a smirk. It reads better in photos if you a little bit exaggerate pulling on that glove. Finally, we're gonna go with a dynamic crouch pose that I like to call the wind-up. Fat Gum's big move involves absorbing and releasing energy, so we're gonna do a pose of him kinda getting ready to throw a punch. Remember that photographing a dynamic pose is usually a bit different from its real-world counterpart. For example, your instinct might be to guard your face and punch at camera, but that covers way too much of you, so you're gonna wanna make some adjustments. And hopefully your photographer will help with that too. It's usually better if you aim your punch a bit to the side of the lens, and a lot of the time it looks a little bit better with your arm slightly bent. Your backhand that's getting ready to wind up and throw that punch shouldn't be directly behind you. It's gonna feel a little bit weird at first, but it actually looks much better if you bring that back arm out slightly. And don't forget to keep your head and your chest up. A lot of the time with a dynamic and fighting pose, you're gonna tend to want to be in your body, but don't forget to be confident and put your chest and your head out. Now you have 3 standing poses, a portrait pose, and a crouching pose to keep in mind for your convention or photo shoot. And if all else fails, remember that Fat Gum is usually showing his teeth in a smile. So that's all I have for you on how to cosplay Fat Gum. You're all refreshed on how amazing his character is, you've made an incredible costume, and you have poses ready. Remember that whether you're watching the anime, reading the manga, doing this costume for a friend or a group, or doing it because you love the character, whether you're a big boy or a skinny lad, male, female, or anything in between, there's no right way to cosplay, as long as you're being kind to yourself and to others. And don't let anyone tell you different. However you decide to cosplay Fat Gum, go out there and kick some butt. And until next time, I'm Hendo. Thanks for crafting with me.